a respected university professor, secretly handed over top-secret NATO military plans to the Soviet Union for 3 decades. One spy claimed he attached a bomb to the ship carrying Britain's Secretary of State for War, sinking it and killing everyone aboard. A French diplomat believed his Chinese opera singer lover was a woman for 20 years, during which time he passed embassy documents to Chinese intelligence. The capture of one charming British officer in civilian clothes led to the unmasking of America's most famous traitor. Cross-dressing princess commanded her own band of counterinsurgents and was executed for treason. A man lived a double life as a wealthy German horse breeder in Egypt for years, all while sending secrets about missile programs back to Israel. And a European princess used her royal status and charm to become a personal confidant of high-ranking Nazi officials, then attempted to sway British and American leaders before a world war. Number 7. Shi Pei Pu, the opera singer who duped a diplomat for love and secrets. Imagine being a young, slightly naive clerk at the French embassy in Beijing in the 1960s. That was Bernard Boursicot. He was lonely. Then he met Shi Pei Pu. Shi Pei Pu was a Minot Chinese opera singer, a teacher of Chinese language, and as Boursicot believed for 2 astonishing decades, a woman. Shi told Boursicot that she was actually a woman forced to live as a man because her father desired a son. This was the start of an unbelievable story. Their relationship deepened. Shi Pei Pu claimed to Boursicot that she had become pregnant with his child. Boursicot was overjoyed. She later presented a child, Shi Dudu, whom she said was their son, supposedly smuggled out of a remote part of China. Boursicot, utterly convinced and deeply in love, felt a profound connection and responsibility. He was completely under Shi Pei Pu's spell. It was during this period, from the late 1960s, that the requests began. Shi Pei Pu and individuals connected to her, who were in fact agents of Chinese intelligence, Kangshom's secret police, started asking Boursicot for documents from the French embassy. At first, it might have seemed minor favors for his beloved. But the requests escalate. Boursicot, believing he was protecting his lover and their child, and perhaps fearing exposure or repercussions for Shi in communist China, began to provide classified materials. Over the course of 15 years from 1969 to 1982, working in various diplomatic posts, Boursicot handed over an estimated 150 sensitive French diplomatic documents. The documents reportedly detailed French foreign policy in Southeast Asia and other classified information. The deception was elaborate. Shi Pei Pu managed to maintain the illusion of being female, even through their supposed intimate relations, for 20 years. He explained his physique and lack of typical female anatomy with stories of Chinese modesty and unique physical development. Boursicot, blinded by love or perhaps a desperate need to believe, accepted these explanations. The whole affair came crashing down in 1983. Boursicot and Shi Pei Pu, who had by then moved to Paris with their son, were arrested by French authorities. It was only then, during the investigation and trial, that the full truth was revealed to Boursicot and the world. Medical examinations confirmed Shi Pei Pu was biologically male. Shi Dudu was not their child. He had been purchased from a doctor in China. Shi Pei Pu confessed to the court how he had maintained the deception about his gender. He explained that he had never allowed Boursicot to see him fully unclothed and had used his acting skills and knowledge of female mannerisms to convince the diplomat. In 1986, both Boursicot and Shi Pei Pu were convicted of espionage and sentenced to 6 years in prison. The French government was deeply embarrassed by the security breach and the sheer strangeness of the case. The documents passed, while not necessarily altering the course of major world events in a dramatic, instantly visible way, still represented a significant intelligence loss for France over a prolonged period. They provided Chinese intelligence with insights into French diplomatic thinking and operations at a critical time. Shi Pei Pu was pardoned by French President François Mitterrand in 1987, after serving less than a year, reportedly as part of an effort to improve relations with China. Boursicot was also pardoned. Shi Pei Pu remained in Paris after his release and continued to perform opera. He and Boursicot rarely spoke again. Shi Pei Pu died in 2009. Boursicot, when told of Shi's death, was quoted as saying, "The slate is clean now, I am free." The story reveals the extraordinary lengths to which intelligence services will go, and the vulnerabilities that human emotion can create, even in the supposedly guarded world of diplomacy. Number 6. Major John André, the charming spy whose capture sealed a traitor's fate. The American Revolutionary War was a time of shifting loyalties and desperate measures. In 1780, the British forces were looking for a decisive blow against the Continental Army. Major John André was a key figure in their intelligence operations. He was young, charming, artistic, and well-liked, even by some of his American adversaries who had encountered him as a prisoner of war earlier. By 1780, he was the Adjutant General of the British Army in North America, serving as Chief of Intelligence for General Sir Henry Clinton, the British Commander-in-Chief. André became the main contact for one of the most infamous figures in American history, Major General Benedict Arnold. Arnold, a celebrated American war hero, felt unappreciated and was deeply in debt. He began to entertain the idea of defecting to the British. His plan was audacious. He would secure command of West Point, a critical American fort on the Hudson River, and then surrender it to the British. This would have given the British control of the Hudson Valley, effectively splitting the American colonies, and potentially crippling the rebellion. André was tasked with finalizing the plans with Arnold. On the night of September 21, 1780, André sailed up the Hudson River aboard the British sloop of war, HMS Vulture. He met Arnold secretly in the woods near Stony Point. The meeting went on much longer than planned, and as dawn approached, the Vulture was fired upon by American forces and forced to retreat downriver, leaving André stranded behind enemy line. Arnold convinced André that he would be safer traveling by land back to the British lines in New York City. Crucially, Arnold persuaded André to shed his British uniform and disguise himself in civilian clothes. He also gave André papers detailing West Point's defenses, troop strengths, and plans for its surrender, which André concealed in his stocking. Traveling under the assumed name John Anderson, with a pass from Arnold, André set off. On September 23, 1780, near Tarrytown, New York, André was stopped by 3 American militiamen, John Paulding, Isaac Van Wart, and David Williams. Accounts differ on their exact motivations, whether pure patriotism or a hope for plunder, but they were suspicious of André. Had André still been in his uniform as an officer, he might have been treated as a prisoner of war if captured. But in civilian clothes, carrying incriminating documents, he was considered a spy. The militiamen searched him and found the hidden papers. Despite André's attempts to bribe them, they took him to an American military outpost. The documents were quickly recognized as being in Arnold's handwriting and revealed the treasonous plot. Word was sent to General George Washington. Arnold, learning of André's capture just hours before Washington was due to arrive at West Point for an inspection, made a hasty escape to the British lines. André was put on trial by a board of senior Continental Army officers. He did not deny his actions, comporting himself with dignity. He argued that he had been caught behind enemy lines inadvertently and should be treated as a prisoner of war. However, because he was apprehended in civilian attire and carrying intelligence, the board found him guilty of spying and sentenced him to death by hanging. André requested to be executed by firing squad, considering it a more honorable death for a soldier, but this request was denied, as hanging was the standard punishment for spies. Major John André was hanged on October 2nd, 1780, in Tappan, New York. His capture and execution sent shockwaves through both armies. It exposed Benedict Arnold's treason, which was a severe blow to American morale but also galvanized patriotic sentiment against the British and traitors. The loss of West Point would have been a strategic catastrophe for the Americans. André's actions and his subsequent capture directly prevented this. While André was a British officer working for British interests, the failure of his mission due to his capture had a profound, if indirect, positive influence on the American cause by preserving one of its most vital strongholds and exposing its most dangerous internal threat. Number 5. Hugh Hambleton. The respected academic who was a KGB mole for decades. Some spies are flamboyant figures, living on the edge. Others are quiet, unassuming, blending into the fabric of society while leading damaging double lives. Professor Hugh Hambleton, a Canadian economist, belonged to the latter category. For nearly 30 years, he passed highly sensitive information to the Soviet Union, betraying the trust placed in him by Western institutions, including NATO. Born in Ottawa, Canada, Hambleton had a cosmopolitan upbringing and education, studying in the United States and Europe. His path into espionage began in the early 1950s. While working in Paris, he was reportedly recruited by the KGB. His academic career provided him with excellent cover and access. He became a respected professor of economics at Laval University in Quebec, Canada. This position allowed him to travel, attend international conferences, and interact with individuals who had access to classified information. Over the decades, Hambleton's primary role for the KGB was as a talent spotter and an analyst, but he also directly provided them with valuable documents. He worked for NATO's Economic Directorate in Paris from 1956 to 1961. During this period, he had access to classified NATO documents. He photographed these documents and passed the film to his Soviet handlers. The information reportedly included details about NATO's military capabilities, strategic plans, and assessments of Soviet strengths and weaknesses. He also provided the Soviets with technical manuals for advanced weaponry. One of his most damaging contributions was providing the KGB with a top-secret NATO document known as the NATO Long-Term Defense Plan. This document outlined the alliance's strategic objectives and military planning for years ahead. He also supplied profiles of NATO personnel who might be vulnerable to recruitment by the KGB. His activities continued through the 1960s and 1970s. He reportedly received payments and instructions from the KGB through various means, including dead drops and meetings in foreign countries. The net began to close on Hambleton due to information provided by KGB defectors. Western intelligence agencies became aware of a highly placed mole, and suspicion eventually fell on him. In 1979, while living in Quebec, he was questioned by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP. He apparently confessed to some of his activities but was not immediately arrested or charged in Canada, a decision that later drew criticism. Canadian authorities reportedly felt they lacked sufficient evidence to secure a conviction for espionage under Canadian law at the time, or perhaps hoped he might act as a double agent, though this did not materialize. Hambleton then moved to Britain. However, British intelligence MI5 had its own information on him. In 1982, while visiting London, he was arrested. His trial at the Old Bailey in London was a sensation. Hambleton initially pleaded not guilty, but later changed his plea. He claimed he had been trying to act as a double agent, working for peace and to improve understanding between East and West. Prosecution, however, presented evidence of his long-standing relationship with the KGB and the sensitive nature of the documents he had passed. He was found guilty of espionage under the Official Secrets Act and sentenced to 10 years in prison in December 1982. The judge at his trial described his actions as a grave betrayal. The information he supplied over 3 decades gave the Soviet Union significant insights into NATO's thinking, planning, and capabilities during a critical period of the Cold War. This would have allowed the Soviets to counter NATO strategies more effectively and understand Western vulnerabilities. Hugh Hambleton was released from prison after serving about 6 years and returned to Canada. He died in 2010. His case highlighted the insidious threat of long-term penetration agents operating within trusted Western institutions. Number 4. Yoshiko Kawashima, the Manchurian princess who became a notorious Japanese spy. Her life was a whirlwind of identity shifts, political intrigue, and tragedy. Born Azing Joro Xianyu, the 14th daughter of a Manchu prince in the declining Vaisam dynasty, she was given away as a child to a Japanese sympathizer and adventurer, Naniwa Kawashima. He renamed her Yoshiko Kawashima and raised her in Japan. This upbringing instilled in her a Japanese identity and a desire to see the restoration of the Manchu people, albeit under Japanese influence. Yoshiko was a striking and unconventional figure. She often, dressed in men's clothing, was skilled in horsemanship and martial arts, and cultivated an androgynous, rebellious persona. In the late 1920s and 1930s, she became entangled in the complex and often brutal world of Japanese intelligence operations in China, particularly in Manchuria and Shanghai. She was known by various nicknames, including Eastern Jewel, and sometimes more darkly as the Mata Hari of the East, or even Manchurian Joan of Arc, by her admirers. Her connections to both Manchu royalty and Japanese military figures made her a valuable asset. She was reportedly involved with the Kwantung Army, the Japanese force stationed in Manchuria. One of her most significant alleged roles was in the lead up to the Mukden incident in 1931, a staged event used by Japan as a pretext to invade and occupy Manchuria. While direct, verifiable proof of her specific actions is often shrouded in propaganda and legend, she was widely believed to have undertaken intelligence gathering and even subversive activities for the Japanese. After Japan established the puppet state of Manchukuo in Manchuria in 1932 with the last Daism, Emperor Pui, her distant relative, as its nominal head, Kawashima's activities reportedly continued. She was said to have organized and led a pro-Japanese counterinsurgency force of Manchurian irregulars, sometimes called the Unguo Army or Pacification Army, to fight against Chinese resistance fighters. She cultivated a glamorous and dangerous image, often being photographed in military uniform. Her relationship with the Japanese military was complex. While she served their interests, she also seemed to harbor her own ambitions for Manchu restoration, which sometimes clashed with Japanese aims. She was outspoken and at times critical of the Kwantung Army's heavy-handedness, which led to her falling out of favor with some Japanese commanders. During the Second Sino-Japanese War, she continued to operate in Japanese-occupied China, though her influence may have waned. She was a celebrity figure, her exploits, whether real or exaggerated, eagerly reported in the Japanese press. She used her social connections to gather information and maintain a network of contacts. After Japan's surrender in 1945, ending World War II, Yoshiko Kawashima was arrested by Chinese nationalist authorities in Beijing. She was accused of treason and collaboration with the enemy, specifically for her activities as a Japanese agent and for leading armed groups against Chinese forces. Her trial was a public spectacle. She argued that she was a Japanese citizen due to her adoption, and therefore could not be guilty of treason against China. However, the court ultimately rejected this defense, asserting her Chinese birthright. On March 25, 1948, Yoshiko Kawashima was executed by a single gunshot to the back of the head in a prison in Peiping, now Beijing. She was 40 years old. Her story is a dramatic example of how individuals can be caught between cultures and empires, and how personal ambition and political currents can lead to a life of espionage and a violent end. The intelligence she gathered in the armed groups she reportedly commanded directly aided Japanese expansionist policies in China, contributing to the destabilization and conflict of that era. Her life remains a subject of books, films, and much speculation, a testament to her enigmatic and controversial role. Number 3. Fritz Joubert Duquesne, the Boer spy who became a German saboteur across 2 world wars. Frederick Fritz Joubert Duquesne was a man whose life read like an adventure novel, filled with daring escapades, deep-seated grudges, and a lifelong career in espionage and sabotage against the British Empire and later the United States. His animosity towards Britain was forged in the crucible of the Second Boer War, 1899 to 1902, in South Africa. Born in the Cape Colony, he fought fiercely for the Boers. During the war, his family's farm was destroyed, and female members of his family were interned in British concentration camps, where some died. These events ignited a burning desire for revenge that would fuel his actions for decades. After the Boer War, Duquesne, a skilled orator and writer, traveled the world, often lecturing about his wartime experiences. But beneath the surface, his espionage career was beginning. He offered his services to various powers, but his primary target remained Britain. His most notorious, though unproven claim from this early period was his involvement in the sinking of HMS Hampshire in 1916 during World War I. The ship was carrying Lord Kitchener, Britain's Secretary of State for War, on a diplomatic mission to Russia. Kitchener was a figure Duquesne particularly despised for his scorched earth policies during the Boer War. Duquesne alleged that he had posed as a Russian duke, gained passage on the Hampshire, signaled a German U-boat, and then escaped the sinking ship, leaving Kitchener to drown. While official accounts attribute the sinking to a German mine, Duquesne's claim became part of his legend. During World War I, Duquesne was undoubtedly a German agent. He was involved in various sabotage schemes in South America and the United States, targeting British shipping and war industries. He was a master of disguise and document forgery. He was arrested multiple times under various aliases, but often managed to escape. One famous escape involved him feigning paralysis for months in a New York prison hospital, even enduring painful tests, before finally making his getaway. Between the wars, Duquesne lived in New York City. Working as a journalist and public relations consultant, he maintained a facade of respectability. However, with the rise of Nazi Germany and the approach of World War II, he reactivated his espionage career, this time working for the Abwehr German military intelligence. He became the leader of what would be known as the Duquesne spy ring, the largest espionage case in U.S. history to that point. Starting in the late 1930s, Duquesne recruited and managed a network of agents in the United States. These agents were tasked with gathering intelligence on American military capabilities, industrial production, shipping movements, and technological developments, particularly related to defense. They used various methods, including obtaining jobs in sensitive industries, seducing contacts, and setting up front businesses like a doll hospital to receive and transmit messages. Duquesne, known as the Duke to his operatives, ran a relatively sophisticated operation for its time. The downfall of the Duquesne spy ring came thanks to a double agent, William G. Sebold. Sebold, a German-American, had been coerced by the Abwehr into becoming a spy, but immediately contacted the FBI. The FBI set up a covert radio station for Sebold to communicate with Germany and secretly filmed meetings between Sebold and other members of the ring, including Duquesne, in a specially prepared office in New York. This surveillance gathered irrefutable evidence. In June 1941, 6 months before the attack on Pearl Harbor, the FBI rounded up Duquesne and 32 other members of his spy ring. Their arrests and subsequent trials were a major blow to German intelligence operations in the United States. The information they had been collecting was intended to aid Germany in its war effort, potentially through sabotage or by providing strategic advantages. The disruption of this network significantly hampered German intelligence gathering in the U.S. at a critical time. Fritz Joubert Duquesne was convicted of espionage and sentenced to 18 years in prison. He received additional sentences for other offenses. He died in federal prison in 1956 at the age of 78. His long career as a spy and saboteur, driven by a personal vendetta and ideological conviction, spanned multiple continents and conflicts, leaving a trail of disruption and intrigue. His leadership of the Duquesne spy ring demonstrated the significant threat posed by foreign intelligence networks operating on American soil even before direct U.S. involvement in World War II. Number 2. Princess Stephanie Juliana von Hohenlohe, the socialite spy who charmed Europe's elite for the Nazis. Princess Stephanie Juliana von Hohenlohe, Waldenburg-Schillingsfürst, born Stephanie Richter in Vienna to a common family, was a woman who used charm, intelligence, and alleged royal connections obtained through a brief marriage to a German prince to move in the highest circles of European society in the 1920s and 1930s. She wasn't just a social climber. She became a significant, if controversial, political operative and spy for Nazi Germany. Her rise was remarkable. She cultivated relationships with powerful men across Europe. In Britain, she became a close confidant of Lord Rothermere, the influential press baron who owned the Daily Mail. Rothermere was initially sympathetic to Hitler and Mussolini, and Stephanie helped shape his views and used his newspapers to promote a more favorable image of Nazi Germany in Britain. She arranged meetings between Rothermere and high-ranking Nazis, including Hitler himself. She also became friendly with other members of the British aristocracy and political figures, subtly promoting German interests and gathering information. Her connections within the Nazi regime were also formidable. She was particularly close to Captain Fritz Wiedemann, Hitler's personal adjutant. Through Wiedemann, she gained access to Hitler and other top Nazis like Hermann Göring. Hitler reportedly referred to her as his "dear princess" and valued her insights into British society and her ability to open doors. He awarded her the Nazi Party's Gold Medal of Honor. She acted as an unofficial envoy carrying messages and undertaking sensitive missions. For instance, she played a role in facilitating the return of the Saarland to Germany and was involved in discussions surrounding the Anglo-German Naval Agreement. One of her key objectives was to foster pro-German sentiment in Britain and to encourage a policy of appeasement towards Hitler's territorial ambitions. She used her social gatherings, her charm, and her network of contacts to spread propaganda, assess British political opinion, and identify individuals who might be sympathetic to Germany or useful for intelligence purposes. She was adept at making powerful people feel important and listen to all, while subtly advancing the Nazi agenda. As war approached, her activities became more overtly intelligence-focused. I-5. British counterintelligence became increasingly suspicious of her. They monitored her movements, her communications, and her contacts, building a dossier on her activities. They noted her lavish lifestyle, which seemed to be funded by German sources, and her persistent efforts to influence British policy. When World War II broke out in 1939, Stephanie was in Britain. Realizing her position was precarious, she quickly moved to the United States. However, her reputation preceded her. U.S. intelligence agencies, including the FBI, also began to investigate her. In the U.S., she continued her attempts to influence policy and gather intelligence, connecting with German sympathizers and trying to build new networks. She was even reported to have tried to influence American foreign policy by cultivating contacts within the U.S. government. In 1941, before the U.S. officially entered the war, she was detained as an enemy alien. President Franklin D. Roosevelt personally ordered her internment, describing her as a dangerous spy. She spent the war years interned in the U.S. The information she had gathered and the influence she had wielded in the pre-war years had provided the Nazi regime with valuable insights into British political thinking and societal attitudes. Her efforts to promote appeasement and a positive image of Germany and Britain, while ultimately failing to prevent war, did contribute to a climate of opinion that may have delayed a more robust response to Hitler's aggression. After the war, Princess Stephanie was released. She managed to revive her social life to some extent and continued to move in influential circles, though her direct political impact was diminished. She died in Geneva, Switzerland, in 1972. Her story is a fascinating example of how social connections and personal charm can be weaponized for espionage, and how an individual operating outside formal intelligence structures could nonetheless exert significant influence on behalf of a foreign power during a critical historia. History often focuses on military spies, but social and political operatives like Princess Stephanie played a crucial, if less visible, role in the intelligence battles of the 20th century. Number 1. Wolfgang Lutz, the Champagne spy, who infiltrated Egypt's elite for Israel. Wolfgang Lutz lived a life so audacious it sounds like fiction. Born in Germany to a Jewish mother and a non-Jewish German father, he moved to Palestine with his mother in the 1930s. He fought with the Haganah, the Jewish paramilitary organization, and later with the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, during Israel's War of Independence. His German background, fluent German and Aryan appearance made him an unusual candidate for Israeli intelligence, but these were precisely the attributes Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, sought for a particularly daring mission. In the early 1960s, Egypt, under Gamal Abdel Nasser, was a primary adversary of Israel. Nasser's regime was actively developing a missile program, partly with the help of German scientists who had worked for the Nazis. Israel was deeply concerned about this program and needed intelligence. Mossad decided to send an agent deep into Egypt. That agent was Wolfgang Lutz. Lutz was given a meticulously crafted cover story. He was to be Wolfgang Lutz, a slight name change, a wealthy German ex-Wehrmacht officer and horse breeder. He established this identity first in Germany, then moved to Egypt in 1961, ostensibly to set up a horse riding club near Cairo. His cover was perfect. He was charming, generous, and loved throwing lavish parties. He appeared to be a bon vivant, interested in horses, women, and high living, the very picture of a decadent, slightly roguish, but ultimately harmless expatriate. His riding club became a magnet for Egyptian high society, including military officers, government officials, and police chiefs. At his parties flowing with champagne, earning him the nickname the Champagne Spy, Lutz cultivated friendships. People talked freely around the jovial German horseman. He never directly asked for secrets. Instead, he listened, observed, and encouraged his guests to boast about their work and their country's military prowess. He also traveled extensively throughout Egypt, ostensibly for his horse breeding business, which allowed him to scout military installations and other sensitive sites. Lotz transmitted the intelligence he gathered back to Israel via a small radio transmitter hidden in his bathroom scales and through coded letters sent to European addresses. The information he provided was invaluable. He identified the locations of missile sites, provided details about the types of missiles being developed, and crucially identified many of the German scientists working on the program. This intelligence was vital for Operation Damocles, a Mossad campaign aimed at intimidating or otherwise persuading these scientists to leave Egypt, thereby crippling the missile project. Lotz reportedly provided names, addresses, and even personal details about the scientists, which Mossad used in its campaign of letter bombs and threats. He also gathered information about Egyptian military plans, troop deployments, and the general state of readiness of the Egyptian armed forces. This intelligence would prove highly beneficial to Israel in its strategic planning, particularly in the lead up to the 1967 Six-Day War. For 4 years, Lotz operated successfully, living his double life, a celebrated socialite by day and a highly effective spy by night. His German persona was so convincing that he even reportedly received a letter of commendation from an association of former Afrika Korps officers. His luck ran out in 1965. Egyptian counterintelligence, possibly tipped off by Soviet intelligence services or through improved radio detection methods, began to close in on a spy ring. Lotz was arrested. During his interrogation, he maintained his German identity, even confessing to being a spy for Germany, perhaps hoping for more lenient treatment. It was only later that his true Israeli identity and allegiance were discovered. The Egyptians were shocked to find out that the man they knew as a former Nazi officer was in fact an Israeli Jew. Lotz was tried and sentenced to life imprisonment. His German wife, Waltraud, whom he had married as part of his cover, though a genuine affection developed, was also arrested and sentenced for complicity, though she may not have known the full extent of his activities initially. However, Lotz did not serve his full sentence. After the Six-Day War in 1967, he was released as part of a prisoner exchange. The intelligence he provided over his years in Egypt had given Israel a significant strategic advantage, contributing to its understanding of Egyptian military capabilities and helping to neutralize a threatening missile program. Wolfgang Lotz's story is a classic of deep-cover espionage, where personality, audacity, and meticulous planning allowed one agent to penetrate the highest levels of an enemy state.